This week at the box office, Dumbo soars its way to number 1 with a $45 million opening weekend. Elsewhere in the countdown, Unplanned puts up a strong opening weekend, and Captain Marvel nears the $1 billion mark worldwide. All this and more on this episode of The Weekend Take.
You're listening to The Weekend Take, and now your host, Sean Schaefer.
Hello everyone and welcome to The Weekend Take. I'm your host, Sean Schaefer, and joining me this week is actor and filmmaker Elza and I. Elza, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Sean. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show. For those of you new to the show, The Weekend Take is a weekly podcast that breaks down the weekend box office results, but looks beyond the numbers at the current topics and trends of the film industry. We'll get started the way we do every week by looking at the films that left the top 10. This week, there were 4 such examples of films that left the top 10. First up was Alita, Battle Angel from Fox, which dropped from the number 10 position down to number 15. Alita finds itself taking in $500,000, a 54% drop from last week. The film lost over half of its remaining screens, losing 763 screens to bring its count down to 676. It had a $740 per screen average as it brings its cume up to $84.9 million in its 7th week of release on a $170 million budget. Next up to leave the top 10 was the Lego Movie 2, the second part from Warner Brothers, which dropped from the number 9 position down to number 13. It took in $585,000, a 50% drop from last week. It lost 588 screens to bring its count down to 801. It had a $730 per screen average to bring its cume up to $104.6 million in its 8th week of release. The next film to leave the top 10 this week was No Manches Frida 2 from Pantelion, which dropped from the number 7 position down to number 12. It took in $900,000, a 49.2% drop from last week, losing 49 screens to bring its count down to 423. Still averaging over $2,100 per screen though, as it brings its cume up to $8 million in its 3rd week of release. And lastly, to leave the top 10 is Gloria Bell from A24, which dropped from the number 8 position down to number 11. Gloria Bell took in $1.1 million, a 32.7% drop from last week, actually increased its theater count this week, gaining 473 screens to bring its count up to 1,127. The film averaged $985 per screen to bring its cume up to $4.1 million in its 4th week of release. So Elza, looking at the 4 films that left the top 10, I know you're familiar at least with Gloria Bell, but are any of these surprises to see leaving after their respective runs?
I don't know about surprises. I'm happy about female-centric films being visible and climbing up the ranks, especially with Captain Marvel. It's not my forte, but certainly something I am definitely interested in seeing. And Gloria Bell to me is very surprising, but also very optimistic because Julianne Moore plays a woman in her, I believe, late 40s or 50s who doesn't have her act together, and we tend to think that we don't have an audience for that, but apparently we do, since women make up 51% of the moviegoers. So yeah, I'd be interested in seeing all of those films.
I mean, I'm surprised as well about Gloria Bell. I mean, I predicted last week on the show that it would hang around the top 10 in the number 9 or 10 position, so I'm a bit surprised by that, even with the theater gain. I mean, 473 screens added on. I just think that the screen count wasn't quite high enough when paired with the per screen average to just break back into the top 10, but certainly doesn't mean it's the end of the road for Gloria Bell. I mean, I imagine it'll still have a number of weeks ahead of itself in the box office.
Right. And again, comparing with Jordan Peele movie and a Captain Marvel movie, the fact that a movie of this thematic importance to quote unquote women, I don't know, it speaks volumes about what moviegoers really want to see. So again, I'm pleasantly surprised to see that a movie that seems, normal's not the right word, but an easygoing movie of this nature is really hitting home with a lot of people. Again, kudos to Julianne Moore. I don't think she can do any wrong. I'm really happy to hear that.
I mean, and for me, because I've been campaigning for weeks now, I am sad to see Alita, Battle Angel leave, talking about strong female characters. Mm-hmm. And I am still personally petitioning that Fox see the light and the opportunity in this and make a well-deserved sequel for it, because while it didn't perform well domestically, it had $84.9 million domestically when looking at a $170 million budget. That itself doesn't look good, but when taking into account foreign gross, the film's made over $400 million worldwide.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge number. And so if that doesn't warrant itself a sequel, I don't know what possibly would. But if Fox has a problem with $400 million, I will gladly take $400 million off Fox's hands. But for now, let's get into the top 10, shall we?
Let's do it.
Number 10.
Starting off the countdown at number 10, it's our first new release of the week, The Beach Bum from Neon, which took in $1.8 million on 1,100 screens, a $1,636 per screen average. The stoner comedy from Neon, starring Matthew McConaughey, who earlier this year had the dubious achievement of having the first real bomb of 2019 in Serenity, which starred himself and co-star Anne Hathaway and as well as Diane Lane, so seeing that film underperform was surprising. But here with The Beach Bum, its opening weekend, a $1,600 per screen average. Not the most positive note on the film, but I think this film offers something that nothing else in the countdown currently does in being this kind of outrageous stoner comedy. But I like Matthew McConaughey in most anything that he does, so I definitely want to check it out. How about yourself? Are you a fan of the McConaissance?
I do like his work on screen, but I gotta be honest with you, those creepy car commercials just, I don't get it. It's like, dude, you sound like a pedophile. What is going on? And there's a cigar and a sunset. There's just something that irks me about them. So I'm torn about him, why he's doing that. But nonetheless, I am a fan of his acting. This necessarily wouldn't be a movie that I would want to see, but I'm curious. So because curiosity will probably get me to see it. And I do think whatever he does do, he puts a spin on it that only he does. So I think it's something I probably will check out.
But it won't necessarily make you want to go out and buy a Lincoln.
Absolutely not. So that is, and drive down an open road. Like, I don't know who's doing those commercials. There's no coherence to them whatsoever. And he's got that creepy kind of sort of like voice that it's like, get in my car and we'll go for a ride. I don't get it.
While he slowly rubs his fingers together.
Right. It's just like, I don't get it. I laugh at them and then I wonder if they're a parody. And then I'm like, no, they're actually serious. I'm just like torn as to, dude, you don't need the money. So why are you I'm just waiting for the SNL skit, to be honest with you.
Jim Carrey did it.
Did it? Oh, I've got to Google it.
It's hilarious. Jim Carrey guest starred on Saturday Night Live and just kept making fun of these Matthew McConaughey Lincoln spots.
They just, I don't understand, but again, I'm going to chalk it up for expanding his creativity. I don't know what to say. The movie, I will check out. The commercials, I tend to change the channel. So there you go.
All right. Well, for The Beach Bum from Neon, looking ahead, given that it had not the most stellar per screen average in its first week of release, which is typically when most people want to see a film, and that it's already at number 10, I suspect, unless there's some further expansion next week of screens, that we'll be discussing it leaving the top 10. But at least for Matthew McConaughey, this is at least a bit of a departure from the overly dramatic roles that he had been known for as of late, and gets back to his roots, in comedy, which is where he first made his breakout. I just want to hear one, all right, at some point in The Beach Bum. And I don't know if The Beach Bum necessarily is responsible or adult enough in the film to drive a Lincoln, so I wonder what car he drives, if at all.
If at all. And the other thing, again, I'm torn with, a cast of Matthew McConaughey. I like Isla Fisher, but Snoop Dogg is in it. He's got like second billing. So I'm a little torn if I'm going to spend the $18.50 necessarily to watch Snoop Dogg, quote unquote, act on screen. So I don't know, just might wait for the Netflix when it comes out. Just interesting choice that he would make at this point in his career.
Number 9.
So moving on to the countdown now, we're up to number 9. Down from number 6 this week is Tyler Perry's A Madea Family Funeral from Lionsgate, which took in $2.7 million this week, a 38.7% drop from last week. The film lost 264 screens to bring its count down to 1,923. The film is still averaging over $1,400 per screen and has brought its cume up to $70 million in its 5th week of release. So for Tyler Perry's A Madea Family Funeral, as I was talking about last week, this being the swan song, so to speak, of the Madea character from Tyler Perry, I don't necessarily see it going out on top of the franchise. Now, mind you, there's 9 films in the Madea franchise, but it currently sees itself sitting at number 3, only $3 million behind Boo! A Madea Halloween, which is currently the number 2 film, but unfortunately $20 million behind Tyler Perry's A Madea Goes to Jail, which is the number 1 film in the franchise. So I think when all is said and done, when it's all wrapped up, Madea Family Funeral will find itself sitting at the number 2 position, as I imagine probably by the time we report next week, given what it'll take in during the week and next weekend's gross, I think it'll pass that $73 million mark. Is Madea And Tyler Perry, your cup of tea, or what do you think of this brand of comedy after we just talked about The Beach Bum?
It doesn't speak to me, and God bless Tyler Perry. And I know that his saga and his story, and being homeless and living in a car, and it's that whole Hollywood success story. God bless him. It doesn't speak to me, but obviously he's tapped into a niche audience that loves it. So kudos to that. It's really not up my alley, but safe to say, unless they've made the official announcement that it's the last one, there could be Medea, in heaven, or Medea reincarnated. I wouldn't be surprised if it does come back in some form or fashion. I find it hard to believe that they're just going to let it go.
Tyler Perry in the press tour leading up to the film has said that this is going to be his last one donning the suit, at least in the sense of Medea being a titular character. I think I wouldn't put it beyond him to have her cameo in some other project of his, but I do like the idea of maybe donning it again and coming back as almost like a Star Wars Jedi, like Force ghost as Medea, trying to talk to people and slap some sense into them. That would be funny.
He's made her such an iconic figure. So if I see her somewhere else, I think I'd probably be more inclined to want to see Medea. But Medea in Medea, not so much anymore.
Tyler Perry really has tapped into something, as you said, and it's something similar to what Eddie Murphy had going into the late 90s, early 2000s, when like you had the Nutty Professor and how he played pretty much every role in the family for the most part, or when he did Coming to America in the late 80s, and he played everybody in the barbershop, and he played Prince Akeem, and he played a number of characters. For Tyler Perry, now kind of like I said, relieving himself of the Medea character, where do you think Tyler Perry goes from here creatively?
I think he's going to stick with that niche, all of those thematic topics. I think he does really well, and I wind up catching myself watching them like on TV when they're on, and I don't know, he's got a really good knack for that. So I think he's going to stick kind of in that vein, and with his Archangel Oprah behind him, I honestly think, his star is just going to keep rising.
Yeah, I also would like to see him branch out a little bit, because like he took a different approach early last year. He put out Acrimony. People didn't really know that was him. Like they had to put it on the poster that it was from Tyler Perry. So I wouldn't mind seeing him going out on limbs creatively and doing some more of that.
Where did he play the lawyer? But you almost forget that it's Tyler Perry.
Was it in Gone Girl? Did he play a lawyer in Gone Girl?
Yes, that's what it was. And it's like, whoa, like he really brought some great acting chops to this role. So I enjoy when he kind of steps outside of his element of that whole Medea persona.
If he wants to take those steps and that kind of branching out from being the auteur that he is to being an actor, to do those things, I'd love to see it, especially now that, like I said, he feels creatively exhausted with the Medea character, and now he can branch out and do other things.
Right. I agree with you. Yeah. And I hope he does.
You're listening to The Weekend Take. Visit our Patreon page to become a patron of The Weekend Take, and for as little as $1, you'll receive exclusive content and perks. Number 8.
All right, well, moving on to the countdown now. We're up to number 8, up from number 39. And in its first week of expansion is Hotel Mumbai from Bleecker Street, which took in $3.1 million, a near 3,500% increase over last week, as it expands from 4 theaters up to 924 screens. The film averaged over $3,400 per screen and has brought its cume up to $3.2 million now in its second week of release. For Hotel Mumbai, I've seen the trailer for this, but Elza, you're familiar with the film. Have you had an opportunity to check it out yet?
I haven't had an opportunity to check it out, but the fact that Dev Patel, who I absolutely love, is in it, Armie Hammer as well, and the fact that it's timely and topical and actually happened is something that I would definitely love to check out.
Dev Patel, who we all first got introduced to, I believe, in Danny Boyle's Slumdog Millionaire, yes?
Yeah.
That was the first time we really saw him, has really made a career for himself, and what I've seen in the trailers and in the clips from the film, I mean, he turns in yet another stellar performance. And looking at the film, to think that this actually happened is just incredible. Now, I'm sure they take some creative embellishments to a degree,
right?
But the fact that the event itself happened and how it happened, it really just pulls me in to want to check it out and see this kind of real life hero versus villain struggle.
Yeah. And again, just going back to Armie Hammer, who continues to impress me with his roles and his choices. I think he's very diverse as an actor. He did the movie that was nominated, Call Me By Your Name, And then, of course, The Social Network. I just love the fact that he's making these choices that I think other people wouldn't necessarily make. So I like him as an actor. So between him, Dev Patel, and the story in and of itself, and it's so timely. This happened, less than 5 years ago. I would be very, very curious to see what they did with it. So I'm going to definitely check it out.
As am I. My local art house theater, when I went to see Green Book, played a trailer for it. I really didn't know about the film. I knew that it was coming out wider this week when I was doing the research weeks ago for planning this week's episode, but at the time I didn't know much about it. And then once I saw that trailer, I immediately needed to know more. And now seeing this such a nice expansion, I mean, it gained almost 1,000 screens.
Yeah.
It went from 4 screens in New York and LA to now near 1,000 screens. It really gives me an opportunity to check out the film.
Fortunately for me in New York, I don't have that shortage. So my favorite art house theater has closed down, Lincoln Center Cinemas. I was a local feature there. Yes, I was dating Shlomi, the 85-year-old usher, but that's okay. We would argue about the movies. It's no longer around. It's heartbreaking, but we do have enough art house theaters so that when movies are first released, I kind of get first dibs. So I'm very grateful for that experience.
Oh, I know. And me being up in to New York City, what is the frozen tundra of upstate New York, if it didn't come to a landmark theater called the Spectrum 8 in Albany, and that's our last and only vestige for proper art house films. So if we didn't have that theater, I probably would never get an opportunity to see this film, but this is certainly on my list to check out.
Number 7.
Moving on to the countdown now, we're up to number 7. Down from number 5 this week is How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World from Universal, which took in $4.2 million, only a 35% drop from last week. The film lost 562 screens to bring its count down to 2,785. The film is still averaging over $1,500 per screen as it brings its cume up to $153 million in its 6th week of release on a $129 million budget. So for How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World, much like Medea's Family Funeral, this is the concluding chapter in the franchise. This concludes the trilogy of the How to Train Your Dragon films, and it's going out on a much better note than I think was anticipated. Originally, when it came out, it opened to a franchise high $55 million opening weekend, but then quickly took a steep drop, and I think it's found its footing now. It's taken these small incremental drops week over week. In a positive note, this weekend, it surpassed the first film's total gross worldwide, as How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World crossed the $500 million mark worldwide. It's sad to see this trilogy and this story come to an end, as it's been a beloved tale by many families that includes 3 films and a spin-off series on Netflix, which has done very well for itself. But the hard part was that there is a market saturation, as I've talked about. I mean, up until this week in the top 10, you had 3 of the same animated family features in How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World. You had Lego Movie 2, you had Wonder Park, and now this week even, you've got another family film in Dumbo. To see How to Train Your Dragon in the face of a much newer title that has a lot more buzz behind it, hanging in there, I think is a nice positive note for the film. But Elza, are you familiar with this franchise? Have you had an opportunity to check them out, or what are your thoughts?
I'm familiar with the franchise, but because I don't have kids, I do have a 5-year-old niece. It's not something that I am immediately drawn to. I would actually be more inclined at this point, because Danny DeVito is actually in Dumbo, to head in that direction. But I'm happy to see that it's done well and the positive image. The franchise is creatively done well. So yeah, I can't speak too much about this though.
And I understand, and me, with my daughter Lily, who, as you know, I take to the movies quite often.
Yeah.
It does get to be quite expensive to kind of regularly take a family out to the movies. And so we went to see How to Train Your Dragon a few weeks back, early on in its run. But yeah, it's tough. If I were a family today, that needed to go to the multiplex to see a movie, I would, much like you, be more inclined to see Dumbo, because I have a personal history in Dumbo with the original animated feature, as does my wife. And this gives us an opportunity to have something in common with our daughter. She's got her Dumbo, we have ours. There's something to talk about. And that would be where I think a lot of families would go. And it's difficult because it does cost a lot to go see movies. So How to Train Your Dragon wouldn't be high on the list if I hadn't seen it previously at this point in its run to rush out to the multiplex to see it. I'd be more likely to go check out Wonder Park or Dumbo because they're newer releases.
I think you hit a really important point. I think if even family-wise, or even if you're a single, parent or person, tickets right now in New York range anywhere from $15 to $18, because we now have stadium seating. You get to pick pick your seats and all that fun stuff. I've discovered on 3rd Avenue after 10 p.m., after kind of yoga, hey, it's only $10. That's right. So that's when Elza goes to see her movies. And it's pick my own seat, and it's me and 5 other people, but 18 versus 10. So when you're talking about a family of, let's say, 3 or 4, and then plus the popcorn, that's $100. That's like date night, you know? And if I were to go in the direction of taking other people, like a family, like you said, I would want something that also speaks to me and to see what they've done creatively to Dumbo, especially with the price tag of what a movie costs today. So this, I would wait. I'd watch the Netflix stuff before I think I caught the movie.
I would feel that this probably has at least 2 more weeks in the top 10. I mean, next week we'll have Shazam that comes out, which I think will steal more thunder from Captain Marvel than anything else.
Yeah.
I think How to Train Your Dragon, it's got the history to have the legs to stand on, at least for another 1 or 2 weeks before it leaves the top 10. But we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Number 6.
So moving on in the countdown now, we're up to number 6, down from number 3 this week, talking about these family films competing for your dollars, is Wonder Park from Paramount, which took in $4.9 million, a 44% drop from last week. The film lost 534 screens to bring its count down to 3,304. The film also averaging $1,500 per screen, right in line with what How to Train Your Dragon's doing, as it brings its cume up to $37.8 million in its 3rd week of release on a roughly $80 to $100 million reported budget. For Wonder Park, this finds itself in a very different position than How to Train Your Dragon. How to Train Your Dragon is part of an established franchise that families have known for 10 years now, and Wonder Park is the first of its own story. I don't know if there's intentions for a franchise to be built from it, but if I'm Paramount, I may be rethinking those plans if I am thinking it's going to be a franchise, because here we find it $52.2 million worldwide on an $80 to $100 million budget. If I'm Paramount, that hurts my wallet. That hurts my coffers.
Yeah.
Because by Hollywood math, you want to do 2.5 times your reported budget to be considered break even. So at the low end, $80 million, that's $200 million to break even. And you've only got $52 million in the bank. It's not looking positive for Paramount, but Elza, are you familiar with the story of Wonder Park? Or again, I know this is another family genre film, but is this one that your niece wanted to check out?
Not particularly. It's so interesting, though, just in terms of the people or the cast of characters that is in it. I think Jennifer Garner has now gone really this route of, she's very interesting because I feel like she's gone back to the thing that put her on the map. And I feel like it was probably done as the divorce with Ben was going through. And now she's kind of oriented herself towards these family roles. And hey, it's a paycheck. I get it. She's got 3 kids. So it's an interesting array of characters in the movie. Again, not something that I would be drawn to see. I'm not a huge fan of Mila Kunis. Ken Jeong is in it, which I think is interesting, but I would, again, wait till it comes out perhaps on Netflix and check it out. But I don't think it's something that I'd be running to the theaters to check out.
I am going to be checking it out with my daughter, likely at our second run theater where tickets cost less, talking about the price of going out these days. I think where Wonder Park misses the mark is one, in the market saturation that's currently out. I think the timing of release was not the smartest on Paramount's part. I also think that Wonder Park tries too hard to be a Pixar film in its storytelling, which I've talked about the last couple of weeks as well. Because Wonder Park here is this story of great imagination and adventure and colorful characters and things like that, but has a very somber undertone. Jennifer Gardner, who voices the young girl's mother, we find out early in the film is very, very sick and has to go away for treatment, which causes the young girl to begin to lose interest in this imaginary world of Wonderland that she has created with her mother, because she feels that she's losing her mother. Coming across, this roller coaster car while she's away at camp, which takes her to the physically manifested version of her imagination of Wonderland, she begins to deal with it as it's under siege by all these bad guys, who I think ultimately is just one big metaphor for her trying to cope with what's going on with her mother and her family and things like that, which is a very Pixar tactic. And I think it's one thing if you're Pixar and doing it because you've mastered it. It's another thing if you're trying to be Pixar and you take a swing at it and you miss like this. I think that's what leads you to be not as successful as, say, a Pixar film.
Yeah, I agree with you. Do it right or don't do it. So I agree with you about hitting the mark there.
We'll see where it goes from here, but this is certainly one that I'll check out either in a second run theater would only cost me $5 for my ticket,
Right.
or on streaming in a couple of months.
And it'll be nice because Lily will be able, because the young girl, June, is roughly around 10 or so, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Lily's roughly around that age, your daughter?
She just turned 8 in February, so.
It'll be curious, her reaction to the movie.
That's the thing, is like when I go to see these family films, which I have seen pretty much every one that's come out at some point in theaters, and then I talk about them on the show, that's always one of my driving motivators. And when I talk about the film is, yeah, I'm an adult. Here's what I think about it. But more importantly, and what the studio cares more about, this is what my daughter thought. And I talk about that as well.
Right. Yep.
You're listening to The Weekend Take. Visit our Patreon page to become a patron of The Weekend Take, and for as little as $1, you'll receive exclusive content and perks.
Now we've reached the point in our show where we take an aside and get to know our special guest a little better. This week we have with us actor and filmmaker Elza and I. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
Oh my God. Well, hello. Yes, I am Elza and I am a filmmaker. I initially started acting. So if you do watch TV, I have to preface everyone, Svetlana Slavic Mail Order Bride, anything Russian, From Russia with Love, that's my forte. Odd Mom Out, her Russian housekeeper on Bravo. That is really what I do. It's so funny because I will audition now and I don't even ask if they want an accent anymore. I just go in full on Russian. So it just might be a language I might pick up just for the hell of it. So from there, I parlayed into, my background is actually writing. I have an MFA from NYU in dramatic writing. I wrote my first solo play called Growing Up Fat and Albanian, Cornbread and Feta Cheese. Much to my surprise, it became this underground indie hit here in the New York theater world. It would just sell out like crazy over a span of about a year or so. We were turning people away. And I'd always had the idea or the vision to turn it into a movie. But I didn't have the funding to do a full feature, but I came into, surprisingly, some money, some funding to do a featurette, which is roughly 40 minutes. I assembled the most amazing cast and crew possible with someone, yours truly, helming the camera. I won't mention any names on the podcast. Sean Schaefer. But having said that, the movie was beyond a labor of love, but we went on, Growing Up Fat and Albanian, to get into 20 international film festivals, win 10 awards. Sean was also nominated for Best Cinematographer in Milan, and we are available on Amazon. The DVD excerpts from our Manhattan Film Festival interview and the trailers. So I could not be more than thrilled at truly the success of the film itself.
For yourself, a lot of your creative motivations are things that happened in real life to you. I mean, for instance, you also did a stage show, Dating and Dirtbags.
Dating, Depression, and Dirtbags, a love story. Yes. That's another one of my favorites. That also, too, did extremely well. It sold out at the theater. The New York Times picked it up, a nice little blurb about it, New York Magazine as well. And it really deals with what happens after a relationship falls apart and trying to pick yourself up and get back out there. And technology has really made it hard these days with all these dating apps and the direction we're heading in. It doesn't male bash in any which way whatsoever, but it just talks about the difficulty of finding and sustaining relationships in the world we live in today. So it is a comedy, and the through line for me, the Albanian family always rears its head. So family has been a very important theme in all of my work, and especially this one. So yeah, I'm pretty proud of that. I've woven that into the feature as well. So we'll see where it goes.
People don't realize just how insane, for lack of a better word, an Albanian family can be. And I was not aware of this until it was right there in front of me when we were filming Growing Up Fat and Albanian, the featurette.
True. It's what makes this unique. And in the feature, I've workshopped it in different screenwriting classes. And one screenwriting professor had said that in one of the wedding scenes, he literally burst out laughing. And his wife was like, "What is going on?" Because he just couldn't believe this had actually occurred. Of course, I embellish here and there, but pretty much 99.9% of what I've written has either happened to me or someone in my family. So it is really based on truth that, in my culture or growing up is really very normal. If you come from a dysfunctional family, which is 99.9% of us, you're going to get it. It's family, it's dysfunction, and the Albanian is it's just a different twist to it with guns. That's all.
Give the listeners a bit of a taste. What is one outrageous thing that we discuss or touch upon either in the featurette or in the workshopping of the feature script you wouldn't believe was true but absolutely happened?
The whole movie is my favorite thing itself, but particularly the opening scene, it looks like you're watching a Cinderella story where, you have the mini-me version of me, and I'm fat and chubby in that beautiful yellow dress, and she's watching this beautiful American wedding, and it's just so perfect. And off in the background, you hear guns and you hear this crazy gypsy music and you see a dead bird fly to the ground. And this is normal because we shoot guns at weddings as a sign of jubilation and happiness. And to the outside world, it's effing crazy. The cops would always show up at every wedding. We knew this was standard procedure, and they would hide the guns among the children or underneath the bride's dress. Now I've given it away, but truth be told, because the police would never look there. As a child of 5 or 6, I didn't think this was unusual. This was normal for me.
Your dad is a huge supporter and influence in you in your writing and in your career. It really shows in the featurette about your father. So tell us a little bit about Rocky.
My dad is a man of few words, but they're very powerful words when they do come out, and he's very progressive. Albanian men, I can't speak about this generation, but in the past weren't known for their sense of progress or seeing women in a different light. So my father never held us back or thought we should be married off. And literally, I use the word off. So he always encouraged education. And that was the one thing that he wanted us to have and to be able to take care of ourselves. So it's really an homage to the values that he's taught me about working hard, keeping your head down, and just, moving forward. So the production company is named after him because, my parents came here with like literally $12 in their pockets as immigrants. They really risked a lot to come here with nothing. And I think, they've done pretty well for themselves. So I really wanted this to kind of be a love letter to my father and everything that he's given us and taught me things that I didn't expect.
Speaking of teaching, you yourself are a professor, correct, at Pace University?
Yep.
What is on Elza's a Greatest curriculum for 2019?
I was teaching gender, race, and class for quite a while, and I just got it because of my documentary work and having an advanced degree when I did documentary work. So I was like, hey, yes, I shot a movie about communism through the eyes of women during the war in the Balkans in Kosovo. I'm the only freak that went out there while NATO was like, no, go home. So that taught me that documentary is really not where I want to be to get killed. So I decided to go into narrative and fiction. So Pace, I just gave a lecture and they were like, hey, would you like to teach here? And finally this semester, they wrangled me into teaching a film course that I'm really, really happy about because I get to show my film, but it's called Women in Film, Past and Present. And what I kind of do is take on the films of the past that have influenced me in grad school, the directors that paid homage to women, and then we look at current films that either have women that helm them, women as directors or producers, or female centrist films. So it's a very interesting, dynamic group of young women screenwriters, wannabe cinematographers, and basically in all facets of the industry. So I really have to say I'm very, very proud, very much so enjoying teaching the course.
How do you feel now being a woman in film at this time when old Hollywood is finally starting to come around and realize that women's stories matter, women in film matter, and now seeing this progression? How does that make you feel as a woman in film?
It makes me feel encouraged, and I think our film came along at the right time. I can't believe it's been 2 years, but roughly around that. So I think we were at that cusp of when change started to happen. I only hope it continues, that we see more women's stories. Because you know what, Sean, it's not just a woman's story, because behind a woman is a man, is a family, is a child, is a boyfriend, a husband. So I think it's a human story. So I'm just thrilled that there's been a lot of positive and enthusiastic reception to more women out there. So, and I just hope it continues.
Looking ahead to in 2019, what is next on the horizon for you, either as a filmmaker or an actor or any one of the multi-talented facets that you possess?
Well, if Spielberg or Redford or Spike Lee does call tomorrow, I will pick up the phone and clearly collaborate. Not a problem. Salma Hayek, I'm available. But I also believe in promoting your own work, and as a writer, doing the full length or developing that, which I have been doing, and hopefully go into pre-production this fall, just working on putting the final touches together. So that is really what I've been working on, and what I will continue to work on, the full-length feature, which I'm super excited about.
All right. So Elza, if somebody out there wants to check out your work or connect with you on social media, how would they do that? elzazagreda.com. I'm on Facebook, Ella Zagreda at Instagram. When you become too popular, people kind of hack into your account, so I've had to have a new one, but it's based on the character in the movie, so ellazagreda.com, Fat and Albanian, themovie.com. You can check us out. Elza, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us and give us more insight into you and your projects. We're going to get back into the countdown now, but we will be speaking again at length when we get to our opinion segment later in the show when we discuss women in film. So in the meantime, I want to thank you, and I appreciate you taking the time to tell us more about yourself.
Thank you so much, Sean. It's been a pleasure hanging with you, and all the best of luck to the podcast, and yeah, to all of our work together. No, I don't know you beyond the podcast. I have no idea who you are now.
All right. Well, we'll get back into the countdown now so we can get some more of your insights on the films ahead, and we'll be chatting again shortly.
You got it.
You're listening to The Weekend Take. Visit our Patreon page to become a patron of The Weekend Take, and for as little as $1, you'll receive exclusive content and perks. Number 5.
So moving on to the countdown now, we're up to number 5. It's our second new release of the week, and it's Unplanned from Pure Flix, which took in $6.1 million on 1,059 screens. Per screen average of over $5,700 per screen, and it has brought its cume, as I mentioned, up to $6.1 million here in its opening frame of release, on a $6 million budget. Now for Unplanned, Elza, this is a film that you're familiar with and you were mentioning before we started the show. So what are your thoughts on Unplanned?
Yeah, this is a film I think I definitely want to check out because it's so controversial at this point. I'm a huge advocate of pro-choice. So the movie starts out that way, and then it takes this really interesting turn. So I've been hearing some interesting things about it, and I don't want to prejudge it, but apparently this is one of the first activists behind Planned Parenthood, and she sees something in an abortion that goes awry or makes her go in the complete opposite direction. So I'm so curious what they've done with this movie and the whole notion of women's rights. So this is something definitely on my top 3 that I think I'm going to check out this week. But I've never heard of this woman, so I'll be doing my research, I think, before going to see this flick. I'm just curious what they do with this movie. I'm very, very curious to see the outcome.
And for Pure Flix, this film is their first release of 2019, looking at their films and how they've done, all of which fared well at the box office. Mm-hmm. So looking at Unplanned, just in its opening weekend, has already grossed $6.1 million on a reported $6 million budget.
Yeah.
And it finds itself out of 17 films released by Pure Flix already at number 8. I think Pure Flix is onto something here. I think this is going to be a good success for them. Obviously a profitable film as it's already matched what its reported budget is. I think this is a great example of a smaller studio making waves by putting out a film that tells a story that's outside of what a major studio typically would tell for a story. Like, this is a more intimate story, and they're doing it on smaller budgets, but reaching very wide. They're reaching broad audiences, and it's proven by a almost $6,000 per screen average. I mean, that's third biggest per screen average in the top 10, only behind the number 1 and 2 film this week.
That's why I'm saying I completely agree with everything that you're saying. These stories are very pertinent, and people want to see them. Look at the figures. Who would have thought a movie of this nature, of this intimacy, about a woman would rank in the top 10? I think the major studios really should start perhaps redirecting. You can do your Captain Marvels and all that stuff, but don't knock the little stories, because I think a lot of people are drawn to them. And here is a prime example of this movie doing exactly that.
But I'm not sure if I want the major studios doing it, because then they're going to put their own twist on it to try and sell tickets.
Right.
And I don't know if I want them doing that. I like these smaller independent studios releasing films like this because they're out to tell the story.
Yeah.
And do it on a smaller budget. Maybe it makes a profit, maybe it doesn't. But, the ones that do make a profit are much of a higher profit percentage, at a $6 million price tag than looking at even something like Jordan Peele's Us, which was put out by Universal. That's a $20 million price tag. If Unplanned cost $20 million, Pure Flix would be looking at losing money. Now they can make this film, small, dramatic, intimate story on $6 million budget, and they're looking at profit.
I just think it's an interesting trend that they're going to be putting their eye on, because once they see anything with dollar signs, I think they'll want to jump on it. So it might be something that I think in the next 3 to 5 years, they'll start trending and picking up these smaller, intimate stories, in my opinion, if they continue doing as well as they've been doing.
And so for Unplanned, here in its first week of release, with a near $6,000 per screen average, I would be very interested to see if this film gets a further expansion next week.
I can't see why they wouldn't do that. So I think we're going to see this film perhaps even climb up the ranks.
These are stories that aren't told by larger studios, so it gives us some more diversity in storytelling in the top 10.
Yeah, and that's the operative word, diversity.
Number 4.
All right, well, moving on to the countdown now. We're up to number 4. Staying put at number 4 for the second week in a row is 5 Feet Apart from Lionsgate, which took in $6.2 million, only a 27% drop from last week, as it only loses 21 screens to bring its count down to 2,845. This film from Lionsgate is still averaging almost $2,200 per screen, and it's brought its cube up to $35.8 million in its third week of release on a $7 million budget. Now, for 5 Feet Apart, I think Lionsgate has really found something. They seem to have kind of hit the lottery on this one, as on the surface just looks like a genre film about two kind of star-crossed lovers who both have some reason why they can't be. In this case, it's a boy and a girl who meet each other in a hospital with life-threatening illnesses. You can see how this story could play out, just changing what the conditions are under which they can't be together. But every once in a while, one of these films really strikes a chord and really finds an audience, and I think 5 Feet Apart has. It's been in the top 5 since its release 3 weeks ago. It's got a very small drop, only 26.9%. That's the smallest drop of any of the films in the top 10, and still averaging $2,200 per screen. And as I mentioned, $35.8 million so far, added with another $15 million foreign gross. I mean, that's $50 million, $7 million budget. Lionsgate has quite the profitable property here. It's great to see a spotlight put on two young actors who don't typically get to prove themselves as leading men or women. I mean, you've got Cole Sprouse, who people know now as Jughead from CW's Riverdale, and Haley Lou Richardson, who was from The Edge of 17 and Split, but not really as a leading lady. So here they are, two romantic leads in a film that show they can do it on the big screen and small screen.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's wonderful to give people who, like you said, aren't these A-list actors an opportunity to really shine. I don't know if it's something that I will make time to see, but certainly like Netflix, yeah. But I'm far more interested in the others that we talked about.
And so from here, with 5 Feet Apart, we'll have to see where it goes. I mean, very little theater drop at all. Mm-hmm. Very small weekend over weekend drop.
Yeah.
I really think it's hitting a good stride here. And for Lionsgate, which, of all the studios that are out there, I think Lionsgate really is one of the major studios that they curate films very well. They select the right films to make these stories after. Lionsgate's always had that ability to give these opportunities and put on a bigger stage certain types of films. Like, Lionsgate used to be known as just a horror film machine. They just churned out horror film after horror film. And at some point in the last 5 to 7 years, they really started taking chances on a lot more diverse content. I mean, I think that really kicked off for them talking about an earlier film with Tyler Perry's franchise. I mean, every Medea film was a Lionsgate release. And I think that was something they were like, well, we'll take a chance on this. And it proved to be very successful for them. And I think they curate films very well as to what they decide to distribute.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think their marketing is on point. It's nice to see that this movie, like you said, hasn't had a drop, and it's resonating with people. And it's actually, I'm just looking at it now. It's playing actually at my theater at Kips Bay. So I might check this out.
This will be one of those after 10 p.m., 5 people in the theater visits.
Absolutely. You can't beat that, Sean. I'm telling you, when I found that out, I was like, wait a minute. Why is it $10? Because they're like, it's after 10 p.m. I'm like, I struck gold. This is the only time I can actually say in New York City, I found a bargain.
Number 3.
Well, moving on to the countdown now, we're up to number 3. Down from number 2 this week is Captain Marvel from Buena Vista and Disney, which takes in $20.5 million, a 40% drop from last week. The film lost only 293 screens to bring its count down to a still large number, 3,985 screens. The film is still averaging over $5,000 per screen as it brings its cume up to $353.8 million domestically and is just under hitting that $1 billion mark worldwide now in its 4th week of release. So for Captain Marvel, Elza, here's a film, Marvel's first female-led superhero film. Is Brie Larson a motivating factor to check it out? Because I know you and I talked, and you're not particularly a comic book Marvel moviegoer.
I'm not particularly a comic book movie super fan, but because it is Brie Larson and what I've read about it and her journey, I think this is something that I would really like to check out. I feel like it's in the vein, of course, I did see Wonder Woman. I don't know who didn't. And I feel like perhaps this might be a notch above in terms of perhaps more depth to the character from what I've read about it in the reviews, the major reviewers. So for that reason alone, I would like to check it out.
And from a storytelling standpoint, if you aren't a comic book moviegoer, this is a good one to check out because Captain Marvel plays as an origin story to the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. So chronologically, this is the first one.
Yeah.
Even though it's the latest release, it's story from a storytelling standpoint. This is the first film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe storyline. It also serves as a very important thread that will connect last year's release of Avengers Infinity War to next month's release of Avengers Endgame, which actually concludes the first era of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So on screen, Brie Larson as Captain Marvel is receiving good reviews. From an off-screen perspective, there's been some controversy drugged up by incels and internet trolls leading up to the film's release because of a simple request that Brie Larson made in embarking on the press tour promoting Captain Marvel, and that was she was pursuing more diversity in the reporters and press that showed up to her press junkets. She requested more diversity and people of color and women to be present at these press tours, stating that, in looking at her press days, she noticed a lot of, older white men, and I don't disagree with her at all. This is part of the progression discussion we were having and how the industry is progressing and moving in a good direction. Perhaps maybe finding a different way to word it would have been wise on her part, but I don't think she needs to be apologetic about any way that she aired her opinion on what she faced. I think it's very straightforward and to the point. How do you feel about this unhealthy kind of hobby some of these people have on the internet?
I think you hit the nail right on the head when you said an unhealthy hobby over something that disturbs a minority of people. Pick something else, let's try to be a bit more inclusive. I agree with you. I don't think she should have to apologize, but at the same time, I don't think these trolls are going away. Yes, the wording could have been different, but diversity speaks for itself. So I hope she continues and other people, both men and women, to kind of come forward and call them out on this BS. It's just so unhealthy. And I think we're moving in the right direction for both men and women. It's not just about women. It's about telling stories, and let's just kind of keep going in that direction.
I agree. And I always taught growing up that when you're upset about something, to pick your battles.
Yeah.
I think in this case, this was a battle not worth picking or fighting, because here's a property that no matter what you do was going to make money.
Right.
It's Marvel. Marvel at this point prints money. So maybe these guys thought they could be, David with a slingshot to try and take down the Goliath.
Yeah.
That is Marvel, but I think that's a delusional thought. They should have picked a better battle.
This is not the right one. Look, had she said something really derogatory or mean-spirited, I get it. But all she was trying to do is be inclusive. And messing with Marvel just was not the smart smart thing to do.
No, absolutely not. And so, looking at Captain Marvel's performance moving forward, $350 million plus domestically. By tomorrow, it'll cross the $1 billion mark worldwide. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, when looking at all of the films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Captain Marvel has already made its way up to number 8 out of 21 films. Captain Marvel is rolling right along, going to cross the 1 billion mark tomorrow. And for any of those detractors to Brie Larson, unfortunately, you're going to have to get used to it, because Brie Larson reportedly is signed on for between 6 and 8 more Marvel films.
Yeah, and she kind of broke that urban legend or urban myth thing of once you get that Academy Award like Halle Berry and Gwyneth Paltrow, you weren't going to work anymore. She's been hustling. So I think Brie is here to stay for a while. So again, they picked the wrong film and the wrong actress to kind of mess with.
You're listening to The Weekend Take. Visit our Patreon page to become a patron of The Weekend Take, and for as little as $1, you'll receive exclusive content and perks. Number 2.
All right, well, moving on to the countdown now. We're up to number 2. Down from number 1 this week was our defending box office champ from last week, Us, from Universal, which took in $33.6 million, a 53% drop from last week. The film managed to pick up 2 screens and bring its count up to 3,743, and is still averaging nearly $9,000 per screen, as it brings its cume up to $128.2 million in its second week of release on only a $20 million budget. Now, that $128 million domestically, paired with a $46 million foreign gross at this point, brings the film up to $174 million worldwide. I think it's safe to say, Elza, that Us really cements Jordan Peele as a prominent storyteller now moving forward.
Yeah, it's between Get Out, Us. He produced BlacKkKlansman.
Yes.
He was behind that as well. I definitely think it completely solidifies him as a storyteller and someone to keep watching out for.
Which is good for Jordan that people have that opinion of him and feel that way about him, as he's taking what many would consider a bit of a risk in revitalizing the Twilight Zone and telling his stories there, as the Twilight Zone is kind of sacred ground,
right,
for a lot of fans of Rod Serling and the original.
Yeah.
I guess the confidence in people in his ability to tell a story will go a long way in hopefully the audience reaction to this new iteration of the Twilight Zone, which premieres Monday on CBS All Access.
Yeah. But that's what I like about him, because he does do an array of things and he takes risks and they seem to be working for him. So kudos to him, but he's definitely cemented himself as someone I think to watch out for.
Yeah, certainly come a long way from doing comedy skits on Key and Peele, I imagine.
Yeah. I mean, who would have thunk, but this is the beauty of this industry. It's so bizarre and ludicrous, and people do 180s all the time.
Yeah, certainly a left turn for him. And when looking at his 2 properties as a creative force, you look at Get Out. Get Out was a much slower burn because it built an audience. Us already has this audience built in now, as people are familiar with his work and aren't taken nearly as surprised. And you don't need someone to tell you via word of mouth, oh, you have to check out Us, in the way that people were like, oh my God, I just checked out Get Out. You need to see this movie. As that film, went on to gross $176 million. Here, Us is, after 10 days, at 128. So
yeah,
I think as long as the word of mouth keeps up, it'll probably surpass Get Out's total. I hope that this film also isn't just dependent upon the audience built by Get Out. I'm hoping it's finding new viewers and new audience to grow Jordan Peele's brand.
Well, this is something interesting because initially I'm not really into horror genres. I kind of wait for them to come out on Netflix, but I like the premise behind this. So I actually think this, after, of course, the 10 p.m. rule, might be something that I will check out.
For Us, moving forward to next weekend, Us, which is an original title, is going to have to deal with the latest in the epidemic of remakes. In Pet Sematari's remake comes out next week.
Wow.
I'll be curious to see how it fares when standing up against Pet Sematary, because for me, Pet Sematary was one of the kind of formative horror films that I watched growing up. But I'm also, for the most part, vehemently against remakes of films that didn't need to be remade. Pet Sematary won't get my box office dollars, but I'm curious how many people will open their wallets to Pet Sematary and how that competition with us will go, catering to the same demographics.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I'm right there with you. If something doesn't need to be remade, I'm not interested.
Either way, for us, I think it stands the chance to do very well next week,
Yeah.
even in the face of Pet Sematary, because I think people really do want these original stories. I think they're more interested in seeing something original than something that they could see how it was done originally and probably better, like in Pet Sematary.
And I agree with you with all the attention he's gotten and garnered, both critically and commercially. I agree with you as word of mouth starts to spread about this movie. I don't think Pet Sematary I'm pretty sure it's going to beat it out or hold its ground. I just think it's going to grow.
Before we get to our number one, we wanted to get to our opinion segment of the show. And this is something that you can certainly speak to as you're teaching a course in it right now. But we touched briefly on your guest segment about talking about women in film. Elza, looking at kind of the timeline of these last, I'd say 4 years in the industry, looking at the progression that we've made and being more inclusive of not only women in film, but more diversity in film, giving more lead roles to people of color and not so much in token or supporting roles. Can you pinpoint it to an event? I mean, typically, like every major change, there's an event. So for civil rights movement, it was, Rosa Parks on the bus. For women in film, can you pinpoint it, you think, to a specific event that really kickstarted this?
I think a lot of voices started to come out. I know I was one of the ones affected by them, was the election of who we have as president. I think women felt such a need to speak out. I can't believe it's been 2.5 years we're going on. I think you see this surge of women's voices and change, and I think that's coincided with who we have in office, and then that affected the Me Too movement and more speaking up, and I think we're kind of going in that direction. So I think our political process and what happened on a national level really spurned women and people themselves to be like, no, it's time I tell my story, it's time I do my own thing. So that would be my take on it. I feel like roughly right around that time, because even before he even had won and we thought that Trump was a joke, that had a lot to do with it, who we elected. And I think it spurned more women to be like, I got nothing to lose at this point. I'm going to go forward and figure out a way to tell my story.
I appreciate that take for sure. And it's so strange, but while he's been the most egregious example, because he knows he's said it, he's even proud of the things that he's said and done. There certainly were others, I think, before him. We learned about the long history that people like Harvey Weinstein and Kevin Spacey, these were people who kind of did it a bit more behind closed doors, behind the scenes, and people needed to come forward and tell their stories, and maybe couldn't before because there wasn't a platform, or maybe couldn't before because they were worried about their careers. It sounds really twisted to say in this world, but is this something to almost be thankful for, that Donald Trump is as big of a piece of garbage as he is to help this?
I agree with you in a very twisted, sort of, ironic way. It is, because what people were doing, I think, was sort of becoming complacent, because I remember having conversations with people. Oh, of course he's not going to win. Oh, of course he's not going to win. No, it's not going to happen. Then you wake up and the unthinkable has happened. And what that did is open the door for the Harvey Weinsteins to put their foot in their mouths, or people to actually come out because they were like, fuck it, I've got nothing to lose at this point. Look at the landscape. Look who our president is. I mean, I'm not intricately linked to anyone in Hollywood. Even I knew that Harvey Weinstein was a pig. So to have it trickle down to me tells you how bad it was. So I think, yeah, if Donald Trump has done any good, he has fostered people that ability to kind of say, I'm done with this. I've got nothing to lose. I'm going to come forward and tell my own story. So in that way, yeah, he's done a lot of good. Who knew?
I always say that everything happens for a reason. And for a long time, I couldn't really figure out what the reason was why we would end up in this situation politically. But maybe this is it. Maybe this occurrence was a thing that lit a fire under the right population of people to spurn change, to move forward and be progressive.
I hate to say it, but if we have to thank Donald Trump for one thing, I definitely think it would be this.
There's been such a rise in the prominence of women in film. I mean, 2 years ago, we got to have Patty Jenkins Aliens.
Yeah.
The director of Wonder Woman, become the first woman to direct a film that grossed over $100 million opening weekend. The first woman to direct a film budgeted for over $100 million. I mean, that was incredible to see that.
Yeah.
You've got Reed Morano, who's a cinematographer and is currently the youngest member, to the last of my knowledge, of the ASC, the American Society of Cinematographers. And she has gone on to do incredible things. She's directed great films. She's been the cinematographer for a number of films and television shows, namely being the director of photography for most of the first season of Handmaid's Tale. And she's done Billions, and she's done all these shows, and proving that what a strong woman she is. There's photos of her behind the scenes, 9 months pregnant with a heavy camera on her shoulder shooting something.
Incredible.
She really shows that she's a warrior, and she's really become one of the poster children for change in having more women in department head roles, like directors of photography, cinematographers, directors, editors. One of my favorite films that would be on my desert island list is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which was shot by Ellen Kuras, a female cinematographer, who now is getting more recognition for her great talents, which I recognized over a decade ago when Eternal Sunshine came out. So there hasn't been any bad that's come out of the progression, I think, of women in film. And for me to say that, as here I am, approaching 36-year-old straight white male who, if you check off all those boxes, kind of puts me up near the public enemy #1 list based on statistically. There is a flip side to it that I think that sometimes the inclusiveness gets mistaken for seeking a bit of reverse discrimination, because I myself have, kind of been in that position where I was specifically told that despite my resume, that I wouldn't be getting a position because they were specifically looking to have a female cinematographer or a person of color, which at the time, it's hard. I'm sure as an actress, it's hard to hear you didn't get the part, you didn't get the job.
Yeah.
But I will defend to my last breath everyone's right to have that opinion and to strive for that diversity. Is it possible to be able to separate the player from the art? And to give you an example is, okay, so Kevin Spacey, behind the scenes, did some really shady things.
Yeah.
Terrible, terrible man. Can we take that out on who he is as an actor on screen? How does that affect the art? Like, does The Usual Suspects and American Beauty, do they become less of a good film because of his involvement? Yeah,
I think, Sean, that's a great question. And that's such a complicated question that I have problems with, because believe it or not, Roman Polanski, Tess of the D'Urbervilles is one of my favorite novels. Again, it's this thematic notion of women and oppression, and Thomas Hardy, as a writer, I just love him. But Natasha Kinski is in it. It's a 4.5-hour movie, and he directed it. It won the Academy Award 1980. How do you separate, the art from the human being? And all I can say is, we are so complicated and multi-dimensional. I don't think I have one answer to that. I think it's complicated, and it's something that I wrestle with, because like you said, look at the body of work of Kevin Spacey, and then you have the reality of who it is that he is. So I have a hard time reconciling the two. I don't want to support those people. I try not to, and I don't understand how they can do that, how they have the ability to make so much beauty, but just be, I don't know, for lack of a better word, so fucked up. So I'm really torn about that.
It's so tough. It really is. It is so tough to be able to separate those two.
It doesn't change my opinion of the movie. It certainly changes my opinion of the person crafting it. But one of my all-time favorite films that I do show in my class is Malena, the 1992 Italian film with Monica Bellucci. It's such a beautiful film on so many levels. And before the credits roll, and it's by the director of Cinema Paradiso. But of course, as soon as the credits roll, and I almost feel, my God, I feel so disingenuous. It's produced by the Weinstein Group. So I have to cut the film before the credits roll, because I'm so torn that Harvey was behind this. But the beauty of the movie, the message of the film, her acting, it's such a hard call. It's such a hard call.
It is. And Monica Bellucci was another representative in the Me Too movement. She went through a lot as well.
Yeah.
How can we move forward? Is it education? Are we teaching young men now so that in 20 years we're not still having this conversation? Like how do we reconcile that? How do we educate? How do we move forward?
I think one of the first things we should start doing is awareness, education, and challenging people. Why shouldn't a woman be allowed if she's the best qualified? Why do you have a problem with that? So I think if we all did a little bit more of that, there would be perhaps less trolling and more inclusivity in the stories that we tell.
Can we get there? Do we get there? Is it a realistic goal for us to get to that point, given the current landscape of things?
I definitely think it is, and I think it requires, Sean, complicity and compromise and compliance. So I think if there was more, again, compromise and people paying attention to each other and what makes something work and doesn't, I think it would really go a long way.
Do you have more confidence now going into auditions to be able to stand up for yourself and say, no, I'm not going to do it that way? Or when you feel uncomfortable, when you start feeling those red flags come up, do you now feel more confident that you can stand up for yourself and speak out against it?
It's interesting. I feel it now, but I feel like now I wouldn't have needed it. I would have needed it when I started out, because now I see what I was up against and the certain things that I had to do and say and act that were so stereotypical that today I would be like, no, I'm not doing this. So I would have needed it 10 years ago. If I can go back to my former self, I'd be like, tell them to basically fuck off. You're not going to do a nude scene. You're not going to like play with your breast. You're not going to do what they think they want you to do to make the scene work. So Monday morning quarterback. Hindsight is foresight, as they say.
I mean, that's great. And I really want to thank Elza for input on this topic, because it is something that I've been kind of really meaning to talk more upon in the show, but I know I needed the right person, the right voice to have the conversation. And I'm glad that we were able to have this conversation about this important topic.
No, thank you. It's been my pleasure, Sean. And like I said, working with you has been nothing but pleasurable, because I think it's important to have people on your team that get you, that get your story, get your vision. They don't have to be of the same sex. It's not about that. It's about understanding the story, willing to compromise, and meeting people halfway. I think that speaks volumes. And of course, talent. So that's why I am extremely happy and proud of the work that you did on my film, and your level-headedness and your creativity and the way you approach a project. It speaks volumes about you as a person and as a professional.
I appreciate that. So I want to thank you again. And we've got one more film to get out of the way. It's our number one, and then we'll take a quick look at next week. But thank you again, Elza, and great conversation on the topic.
My pleasure, Sean.
You're listening to The Weekend Take. Visit our Patreon page to become a patron of The Weekend Take, and for as little as $1, you'll receive exclusive content and perks. Number 1.
All right, so we've made it. We're at number 1. It's our third new release of the week, Dumbo from Buena Vista and Disney, which took in $45 million on 4,259 screens and over $10,000 per screen average, as here it is in its opening frame at $45 million. Dumbo is a live-action reimagining of the animated classic that we both know very well, as many audiences do. I can't speak to the film itself yet, as I haven't seen it. I have an expectation for the film on both knowing the source material, the original animated feature, and an expectation knowing what Tim Burton can do with live action reimaginings, as he's done it in the past with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Alice in Wonderland. What do you think we can expect from Dumbo? Do you think it's going to be more true to the animated feature, or has Tim Burton, you think, taken it in another direction to give us a new tale to be witness to?
I think he's such a box of, like Forrest Gump, box of chocolates. You never know what to expect with Tim Burton. But I can't help but feel he will take it in some type of direction that we don't see coming. So that's why I think, for me, as a Tim Burton fan, I do want to see this and see what he's done with it. I do imagine, even if he sticks to, 20% of the script, I will be crying. So I'm expecting that. But I do think there is going to be a turn that I don't expect. So that's why I'm very curious to see what he's done with Dumbo. And again, the actors are so interesting. I want to see it for that reason alone. So I'm looking forward to that, actually.
He has assembled a great cast for this film. And it seems like one of the things at first blush that seems to be different with this live action reimagining is there's a bit more emphasis and story behind the people that are a part of the circus.
Yeah.
Namely, Danny DeVito, Colin Farrell's part, and Michael Keaton, who Michael Keaton looks healthier than ever after seeing him in Birdman, and where he just looks gaunt and unhealthy. There definitely seems to be a bit more emphasis on the family mentality of the circus and the performers in the circus. So I know that at least that'll be different from the animated feature. I mean, in looking at the numbers as far as reviews and audience opinion of it, it currently has a 50% on Rotten Tomatoes critically. So critics are right on the fence on it. They either like it or they don't.
Yeah.
However, audiences, the people who pay the tickets to put their butts in seats, are liking it, as it has an A- currently on CinemaScore, which speaks very highly of the film. The question is, though, are audiences leaving it, liking it because they're wearing their nostalgia goggles, or is this new tale, this new retelling, genuinely something that they enjoy?
As a child growing up, it was all about Dumbo and his mommy. The fact that he's made these characters come to life is something that I would really like to see.
And looking at this as, the latest in the Disney live action reimaginings, I mean, of course, we've had, The Jungle Book and Alice in Wonderland and Beauty and the Beast. Yeah. Beauty and the Beast was a massive box office success, which I wasn't surprised about. The opening for Dumbo, though, is a bit low for what I would have anticipated. Cinderella had a $67 million, Jungle Book, $103 million, Beauty and the Beast, $174. So Dumbo really is lacking in its opening weekend. And so one of the things that I'm curious to see with Dumbo is if Dumbo falls short or becomes a loss for Disney, do you think that affects the direction Disney takes beyond what they've already slated?
I don't know. I don't think it will. I think what they've slated is a pretty stellar roster of films that have proven success. I think they might just take this as a loss. I don't think it'll deter them, to be honest with you.
They're making the right moves in the next two they're doing, being two of their most popular ones. I mean, you're talking about Aladdin and The Lion King.
Yeah.
I think they're really bringing out the big guns for the next two.
Yeah.
Elza, looking at all the Disney animated features, is there one that hasn't been done or isn't currently slated to be done? Is there a favorite kind of animated Disney film that you'd like to see them do a live action reimagining of?
I loved Brave.
Okay.
I just loved her red hair and I loved her fiery little, but I can't think of any, Sean. I think they've really done them all.
I think anything that they would try to move on from here would be a more obscure title. But for Dumbo, looking ahead, it was a little bit under industry expectations. The industry expected it to open to, 50 to 55 million. It opened to 45 million. Again, Shazam being this new direction for Warner Brothers and DC to be a bit more kid and family friendly in their superhero movies. I think that may pull some of the same audience that would see Dumbo. So it'll be interesting to see where Dumbo goes from here. But I mean, it's certainly something I'm going to check out. My daughter's been watching all the commercials that count down the days to its release, and she wanted to see it right after school on Friday, and we just couldn't because we had too much going on. So certainly be checking it out. But seeing where it goes from here and what impact that may have on this trend of Disney reimaginings will be interesting to me to see what impact it has.
Yeah, I agree. But I definitely want to check it out. Remember, the $10 theater, 10 p.m., so I'll be doing that.
But now looking ahead to next week, we have 3 new releases entering the market. The first of which, obviously, is Shazam from Warner Brothers, opening on over 4,100 screens, so a lot of screens to open up on. The second is the Pet Sematary remake that we discussed from Paramount, which will open on over 3,400 screens. And lastly, we have from STX Entertainment, The Best of Enemies, which is a drama and stars Taraji P. Henson and Sam Rockwell. So that one is one that I'm certainly interested in checking out just because of the players involved.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Oz? I mean, looking at these 3 films that are coming out, is Shazam a surefire win to be number 1 next week, you think?
I think it probably is, but again, it's not in the vein of what I would see myself catching, and I'm right there along with you. The Taraji P. Henson and Sam Rockwell movie looks interesting because of the characters and the choices, and Taraji P. Henson really stepping out of her comfort zone, and I think kind of proving herself as not just that she isn't a competent actress, but she's played that one stereotypical role from Empire, and now here she is really kind of bare bones, kind of like the Lady Gaga of Star is Born. So I'm going to be really curious to see how that does. And again, that's another one based on a true story. So I think these true story biopics really, I don't know, they seem to be catching a lot of interest. And I think it's a great direction that our industry, as far as even indie filmmaking, is going in. So that's the one I'm going to keep my eye on for next week.
And again, it's being distributed by STX Entertainment, another one of these smaller boutique studios.
Yep.
which earlier this year had a huge success in The Upside, which grossed over $100 million. So ironically enough, Upside was acquired by STX Entertainment from the Weinstein Group when it went bankrupt. So STX also very good at knowing what films to curate and perform well for them. But we can agree, though, that looking at the remake of Pet Sematari's release, that I know people will show up for it, but I'm not wishing really any success on it, because I think it then sets a precedent for the continuation of a trend that I don't want to see continue.
I don't think it's going to happen. It falls in line. There's other factors involved, such as gender, but I don't think it's going to set the bar. Like you said, it was such a classic. You know, look what happened with Ghostbusters. I mean, the complete and total flop. I think why mess with such a good formula? So I like you said, people will go out and see it, but I think the critics are going to rip it apart. I wonder always who makes those stupid decisions like that. But again, I'm not a Hollywood, executive, so I wouldn't know. I'm not banking that that's going to make any money. I think Shazam will do well. And I'd be very curious to see how Enemies does. That's something I would support.
All right, well, that just about wraps it up for us this week here on The Weekend Take. I want to thank Elza for being my guest this week. And just one more time, Elza, if people want to reach out and get in touch with you, how would they do that?
elzazagreda.com, Ella Zagreda on Instagram, or Fat and Albanian, the movie, all over social media.
All right, and The Weekend Take is on social media as well. We're on Twitter at Weekend Take. We're on Facebook at www.facebook.com/The Weekend Take. And please check out our Patreon campaign at www.patreon.com/The Weekend Take, where for as little as $1, you can become a patron of The Weekend Take and get exclusive early access to extended cuts of the episodes, so you can hear more of the conversation that Elza and I had today. But for us right now, that wraps it up, and we will see you all next week. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Weekend Take. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and Google Play, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Visit our Patreon page to become a patron of The Weekend Take, and for as little as $1, you'll receive exclusive content and perks.